Hello everyone. So I got this video idea from a comment asking me to go over Helix and my workflow and all that because they found it, what was the word, awkward to work with. So I just wanted to put like a disclaimer at the beginning of this video that I'm not subscribed to any sort of dogma about whatever software I use or you use. I switch up my development environment all the time. I started with NetBeans when I was first learning to program, as you do in school with a very old version of NetBeans, and then, gradually did like IntelliJ, and then I was doing JavaScript, and naturally I did VS Code, and I did try Vim for a while. But that was many years ago. So I'm not really up to date with the Vim stuff, and it's entirely possible that I end up switching to Vim at some point. But nonetheless, I wanted to say there that I'm not here to convince you to switch to Helix at all. I just think it's pretty fun to talk about the tools that we use, and I think Helix is sort of like its own language, and I think that there's a lot of cool things that it does correctly, and some shortcomings it has. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So if you're only here for engine content, it's not really going to be about that. Anyway, so first of all, we've got a bunch of buttons to go over that are really cool. So the brackets, as I showed off before, are really useful, especially when cycling through stuff in a row, specifically when it comes to parameters. So if I go to a function here, go to any of these functions, specifically like these OpenGL calls is a perfect example of this, right? So I can go to next parameter with a, and this is super useful for when you're writing any of these OpenGL calls, because, for example, you may be working on some attribute or whatever, and you do not need to fill out all of these parameters. You really only need to fill out when you're copying and pasting. You only need to change this to a 1. Maybe you need to change the pointer, so you go to the end here and then just change this to a 3 or whatever, and then boom, you have it. So I think that that's super useful. So there's that, and of course the Jumplist is something that I use all the time. So you see these buffer tabs at the top, and I enable this just to show you. I don't usually use these buffer tabs actually, but so yeah, it has basically tabs that are open to the background, right? But I don't actually use those buffers. I use the Jumplist pretty much exclusively, because I find it kind of annoying to type out BN, BP to go buffer previous, buffer next. You can also go BC or BCO to close all of the other buffers, or BC to close the current buffer. So those work like a wheel of going around. Also, I think that there is a shortcut that isn't just the command to go to the next buffer, but I prefer to use the Jumplist because I don't really, when I'm working, for example, I will have a bunch of buffers open. Like I'll have this, to a random point, and then I'll have this to a random point. I'm one of those C programmers that ends up having just a lot of separate large files around, and not necessarily like a lot of different small files. So I end up using the Jumplist a lot, and it works within a file too. So for example, let's say I'm on distribute new collision triangle, and I also want to check out the init static geometry, which it doesn't use it, but let's just pretend that it does. Okay, So I'm going to save this to the jump list, and then this takes me right back up to where I was with distribute new collision triangle. And then I can go back and forth. This is super useful to me when usually I end up editing two functions at the same time that depend on one another. Like specifically earlier I was refactoring the texture array stuff. So we can go to texture, what is it called? Init text arrays, right? So here I refactored this earlier. This is now texture arrays are it's an array of texture arrays that get passed in draw calls. So they're batched based on their settings, their min and mag filter, and their wrap, and their anisotropic levels or whatever, and their MIP levels. And so it basically just compares them and creates new groups, and then creates them in order. This is efficient because sometimes we want different textures with different settings. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So what I was doing is I just saved that to the jump list, and I was also using this function load texture registry, and I saved that to the jump list, and then I'm just going back and forth perfectly between these two functions. And that's just really great because those two functions depend on each other, and I need to go back and forth. But as you can see, I just had a funky little thing up here, right here. So you can see on the top. I'm actually going to show you something neat here with the extra menus. So we went over the brackets earlier. Really. It's really neat, the brackets in general, because it's neat for filling in the blanks. So let's say I want to go to the next comment for a specific selection. I can go to the next comment, just like that. And it will select everything within that, which is super neat. So we have other kind of modal buttons, right? And one of them is Z. And if I press Z, it automatically aligns me to wherever my cursor is. So it becomes a kind of a common paradigm of going G, B, ZZ, then, or GT for top, ZZ, or GB, ZZ for bottom, to align yourself when you're moving around a function. It's quite neat. So you may see this was an example I made of some funky little things you can do with Helix, with ampersand, and aligning. And I find this very readable, and it's super easy to do in Helix. So I think an easy way to show this off is within a header file with some struct. And so I was thinking earlier we can do it with this struct. I'm going to follow my own advice and go ZZ there. So I want to go over the other buttons first. So G has all of these: go to definition and go to references that I use all the time. For example, if I want to know, I mean, this is just basic programming stuff, right? But if I want to know what other struct has blur voxel, I'm not going to press that because I'm not dumb, right? Oh, nothing else has a blur voxel in this file. Okay, well, oh yeah, it does. Okay, so this shows all of the references to blur voxels within all the open buffers that I have, which is super helpful. I'm sure that this is just LSP stuff, right? But I use that all the time. And I think it's really convenient being on those buttons because I like the fact that the G list brings up all of the things that you're doing so that you can be absolutely sure what you're doing next. Oh, GN and GP is next in previous buffer. Okay, so some things that are very specific to Helix are the multiple cursor support with all of these unique buttons like underscore and ampersand that help you change your selection, because it's all based on selection, right? That's the paradigm. But there are some really interesting things that you can do. So for example, we can do 6 Shift C to make 6 multiple cursor selections, right? Now, most types in C specifically are going to end up just with no white space, right? So that's great for this, because then you can do something like this, and that automatically aligns it to the way where your cursor was. Now there's a really awesome kind of hidden command here that I use all the time, and that is Alt semicolon, and that takes us to the other side, and Alt Shift semicolon makes sure that we are always at the front, but Alt semicolon switches us our orientation, and that's awesome because now we can align with the other direction. So it matters with which way we're facing to what we're going to align to, and that is super helpful. Now let's say it's common to get rid of the other cursors. Now let's say, for example, I want to separate the brackets. Well, this is where Helix becomes kind of like a language, because there are so many different ways that we can select these based on where our cursor is. So if I make these here, I think to delete the last one, it is Alt comma. That's why it becomes kind of a language, is because you can kind of guess what the buttons do at some point. It's not all hard-coded. Like the Alt modifiers specifically work on modifying the order of your selections, is what I'd say. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in a second. So let's say we want to align these brackets specifically, and we can go VGL to get the rest of the line, and then once again change our orientation to the other side, and then do that, right? And then let's say we want a little bit of space. We can either space it out like this or Shift Tab to get that extra space. Now this, you know, it might not seem very practical, but as I showed later with documentation, I find it super, super useful when I'm making a new struct, if I want to be super clean with it. So that's a cool thing that you can do. There's also a bunch of other things that you can do here, and I wanted to show one of them specifically off that I think is very unique about Helix and how it works. Specifically, let's say we want, for whatever reason, we don't like the way that this looks. I think that it's ugly, these not being in order by the length of their type, right? And let's say we're up here. Now how do I select the inner amount of these brackets? Well, you can go GL to get to the end of the line, and you would think MM to jump between the brackets. You go VMM, but I don't actually like that. What I would recommend to do is instead let's go back to where we were, and MI instead is the select inside the brackets. Okay, now you can do my input is going to be closing bracket here, and that selects everything within the brackets within your next character. And typically in C structures, you're only going to have brackets at the edges of structs, so you can implement that very easily in C code. And then let's say underscore to get rid of all of that extra white space, and now we have the interior selected without the edges of the struct, right? And now we can do Alt S to split on new lines, and then I'm going to show you something really cool here, is Alt Shift parentheses are now changing the order of these. So you can see where this gets really, really funky, right? Because now we can cycle through. Shift parentheses just cycles through lines in our current selection, right? So that doesn't have to do with lines, it's just whatever we currently have selected. As long as there's space between it, it'll cycle through. And this works without new lines too. So let's say I want to... this video is going to be a lot longer than I thought, but I'm just nerding out about this totally. But let's say I want to, for whatever reason, there's multiple applications for this, but let's say I want to put world pause inside of the brackets and put max blur texels outside, right? So we can split our selection on this character, but you're going to have to escape it. And you can see we split on the bracket now, and we can do Alt-Shift parentheses like we were using earlier and switch these two. Now, you may think that's a lot of keys, but you actually start to get pretty fast at this and end up speaking the language to a proficient degree rather fast. It's not actually a big learning curve. So let's say I want to get to the end of the line, but I don't want to press GL because for whatever reason GL and GH are a bit annoying for me. Or let's say I want to get to the first character of a line rather than this start here without the tabs, right? So it's going to be capital I and capital A. And the reason why that's super important for the how Helix works is that I is always at the beginning of the cursor and A is always at the end of the cursor. And the sooner you accept that and start working with that, the better you're going to be off. So if I do VWB or WB is the typical select the current word, right? Then that matters based on the order you press it in. So let's say I do BW by accident, right? Or I end up with a selection that's in that direction too, and I don't want to do this alt semicolon, go to the beginning and then press I. What I can do is literally just keep my cursor there and then press I, and it takes me to the beginning anyway. I'm not gonna lie, I forget about this all the time and I end up pressing A, but you can always just press, oh man, I'm at the wrong side, and then press escape I, brings me to the beginning. That is super useful to have. So anyway, I rambled a lot about this and that, but those are the features that I use a lot. Maybe you just don't find those very useful or applicable, but I use them all the time when writing my code. That's where I would recommend. So for example, to combine a few things together, let's say I'm writing this function and I put WS and WT in the wrong order. Well, we can go into visual mode with V, then bracket A, and then split our selection on commas, right? And then just switch them around like that. And it is taking a while because I'm speaking through it rather than just doing it. But I hope you can see where this would be useful. So you can do all of this stuff. It's very, very useful. For example, if I have a few lines selected here. Also, the thing that I love so much about this is visual mode, because let's say for whatever reason I start over here and then I go V down, 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 right? And now we somehow get over here. As long as I press X, it extends the selection to both of my 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 sides. So that means that I don't have to go back here and press X to get that line, and X will always get the next line. That is super convenient for copying and pasting stuff. It just works very, very well and fast, because pressing X is just, it makes a lot of sense to get both of those lines, because you can just go V and go down and not have to worry about where you are, and just end on a line and always get the top and bottom line, right? Something else that I wanted to talk about was what I was talking about earlier with these splits. So splits is Shift S to get to the split, and you can see the regex back down at the bottom of my screen. That's where I'm typing. You can also do lowercase s is select, right? And so let's say I want to select all of the s's that in my selection, then I can select all of those s's. This is super useful for when you don't want to do all this searching, right? Because search is going to be here, and this is what they tell you in the tutorial, right? Is to search for this, and then you can press V and then N, and then go back with capital N. And so this becomes quite useful, but let's say for whatever reason you only want to get every other S, this becomes quite annoying, because then you have to go NV, 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 and so and then if you mess up, you have to go back, and that's very frustrating. But if you start off with your selection, I find it much easier to do it with the regex, with the select or the split based on what you have. There's also some really niche things with like Shift J brings the next line onto your line, and I think Alt Shift J, maybe, is it Alt J? Anyway, there's some combination there that then selects all of the white space. So there's a lot of, you can search up the keybinds. There's a lot of weird stuff, especially with macros, that I don't really know anything about. I don't typically use macros because I feel like thinking out macros for formatting my code just naturally slows me down. But there are all of those. Anyway, this video has gone on for quite a bit. I just wanted to nerd out for a bit about Helix and why it's cool. Obviously, I don't use all of the Z commands. Obviously, I use page up and page down. It's pretty standard. But all of the view stuff is, other than the align view, I think, is pretty much just the commands themselves. So the menus just really help you remember the commands. But I also really like this the paradigm about deleting things. So for example, if I want to delete a line, then it automatically is copied to a register. This is exceptionally useful, I think, because it saves a couple of buttons when it comes to cut and pasting and all that. Just having it on a register is super useful, and you end up using these registers quite a bit. But I typically I end up forgetting, when I delete something, and then I get annoyed when I go to paste whatever else. So I think that is kind of a shortcoming. I don't know. Some certain situations I like copying what I delete with D, and it works well, but sometimes it doesn't, Like, I kind of wish that there was something where I could do that with entire lines, because usually when I'm copying and pasting, it's a big selection. But for example, let's say I want to change this to, I press, I'm at an ISO level, and then I press D to get rid of it, and then I want to now paste whatever I had in my in my in that register, it's now going to be overwritten by an ISO level, and that I really find annoying. But so yeah, I think I went over most of what I use, and once again, you might not find all these things super useful, but obviously, it can run shell scripts like this. You can access shell. You can also do things. I'm gonna put in the description here a bunch of other videos that are really good resources on YouTube about. You can also pipe things to sections of code to other programs and stuff like that. But anyway, just a quick video today about that because somebody asked me about it. I'm not here to convince you to change development environments. I just think Helix is pretty cool, and the things you can do with Helix are pretty cool. And maybe it's entirely possible that there are extensions that do all of this in Vim. I just am ignorant to it, but I don't know. I think it's cool. So thanks for sitting through this if you did, and hope you have a good one.